Okay, we're now live.
Okay, that's great. So thank you all for attending this virtual meeting of the Economy, Transport and Environment Decision Day. The meeting is being webcast on YouTube via the County Council's website. Deputations, I haven't received any deputations, but Councillor David Simpson is present and he is requested to speak on some of the agenda items, and I will call you as and when, David, if that's okay. Also, just to note that Councillor John Bennison sends his apologies as well. So we go straight on, if that's okay, to agenda item 1, which is the Transforming Cities Fund. Stuart, are you giving a quick brief?
Yes, Chairman. I know you're very familiar with this initiative and have been involved in a lot of meetings with both the Southampton area and the Portsmouth area bids. Effectively, Chairman, this report's been brought for you today to update the funding position following confirmation from the Department for Transport on the Tranche 2 funding for Transforming Cities and both projects in the Southampton and the Portsmouth area, including significant projects and levels of investment for the Hampshire County Council area have been announced. And this report is seeking your basically your endorsement to recommend to Cabinet and on to Council that the capital programme should be augmented to include the Transforming Cities Fund Tranche 2 bids. And that will really be a precursor to work starting in earnest, and we hope that some of those projects will be underway this year, hence the recommendation to you to get those to Cabinet and Council in the current cycle, Chairman.
Okay, that's great, thank you very much. And this is one of those projects where joint working and partnership working with Southampton City Council, Portsmouth and of course the Isle of Wight and an effect in terms of our schemes. But it's secured, well in excess of £100 million, and a big percentage of that has been spent on Hampshire's network as well. So it's very encouraging to see, and the type of projects that they are as well, in terms of bus priorities and cycling and walking as well. So it's really, really pleased to sort of see this coming forward now. It has been a lot of work, and it has been a lot of work for officers on all the local authorities, but it's nice to see this actually come to fruition. So very pleased to see it going into the capital programme. I don't think there's probably anything further to add. Like you say, Stuart, I sit on the Southampton and Portsmouth TCS, so sort of keeping that joined up, if you like. So very well aware of what the programme is, and it's been discussed many times. David, I didn't think you wanted to comment on this one, did you? Not as far as I'm aware.
No, just to congratulate the officers on getting the money.
Absolutely, yes. No, it's been a great deal of work, but it has proven successful in the end. So I don't have any further comments. It's been through lots of processes to get to this point. I usually say that at this point in the meeting. Many of these papers have been through full scrutiny and been discussed on many occasions, and certainly the TCF has been that with the other authorities as well. So Katie, unless there's nothing further from anybody else, I'm very happy to accept the recommendations. On page 5 of the pack, set out 3 down to 6, Katie. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, so we go straight on to agenda item 2, which is the Hampshire Property Flood Resilience Programme. Yes. Simon?
Simon's going to lead on this one, Chairman, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the paper before you is a proposal for a 2-year pilot programme to support the delivery of property flood resilience to properties within the Southern Regional Flood and Coastal Committee area of Hampshire. The project would be led by the Environment Agency. The County Council will be a supporting partner. You will know that the County Council Chairman has benefited from flood and coastal erosion risk management for a number of schemes, actually over the last 5 or 6 years, been very successful. However, through that process, we've identified that there is a gap here in terms of addressing a number of communities and properties across Hampshire that are at risk of flooding, but which would never be able to tap into the flood and coastal erosion risk management capital pot for the sorts of flood defence schemes that we've seen at Hambledon or Romsey or Winchester, for example. So this proposal is about addressing that gap and finding a way to support the Environment Agency to deliver that level of support and protection for those properties.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I think having sat previously on the Regional Flood Coastal Committees and the conversations about the criteria, and this is another good example of working in partnership with the EA as well. So thank you for that. David, you wanted to comment on this one. Councillor Simpson here.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. It's one of those things which is great, and I'm pleased we're doing it, because a lot of people who've slipped through the net are going to be helped. I just have this thing that the individuals are going to suffer. Where do we actually draw the line? If it's 100 people, then the council steps in, picks up the tab with the Environment Agency, does the work. Where do we stop? Is it at 10? Is it at 20? Is it 30 homes? Because these individuals are, of course, still suffering, and I appreciate it's a small amount. It'd probably cost more to administer, giving them the money than to do the work than to actually give them the money to do it themselves. But we're looking for the individuals and the insurance companies to pay along with this. And again, I appreciate it's the Environment Agency, not necessarily the county. We're not the lead, but it's also the Environment Agency and the water companies that, of course, have failed when these were developed in the first place.
Okay, Simon, would you like to comment?
Yes, I'll perhaps start with the overall number, because that's probably a good place to start, isn't it? I think the first thing I'd want to say is this is a kind of 2-year pilot programme. So the intention very much is about exploring the feasibility and viability of this approach compared to other approaches that we will be looking at and examining. And one of those will be looking at the role of the insurance company and other partners in terms of delivering this sort of protection. So the number of properties that we're looking at the moment, and I think with the report talks about a typical year being about 30 properties. So over the course of the 2 years, hopefully we'll be looking at about 60 properties or so benefiting from this. We are starting from a standing start, so there's going to be, that's in itself is going to be a bit of a challenge. But that number, 30 per year, is based on experience elsewhere about the feasibility of delivering this sort of programme in somewhere like Hampshire. There is an overall number of properties that have been identified through a desktop survey and study carried out by the Environment Agency, and that's identifying properties at very significant risk of flooding. So at this stage, in terms of the proposal and the approach, as the report sets out, the package is very much about the County Council supporting the Environment Agency in the delivery of this. The Environment Agency will be project managing this. They will be drawing down funding from Flood Defence Grant and Aid, so the national pot, and local levy from the Southern Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. I have to say, both of those are subject still to a business case, but the only way that we can begin to contemplate this is by doing this at a scale. On an individual community by community basis, it wouldn't work. So our best chance of success here, working with the environmental agencies, is to put together this programme for the whole of Hampshire within the Southern Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. Councillor Simpson, I hope that answers your questions. Please let me know if not.
Well, actually, Simon, it answers an enormous amount. It was the unfairness, it's not equitable that if there's 100 people, for instance, where you live, for instance, if the whole of the road is flooding, we will step in and do something about it. But if one of the houses is flooding, we won't. We'll tell them to get on and do it. Is the way it's written and the way the pilot appears to be working. I'm not saying it's wrong, because I'd rather these people were helped in some way than not at all. What I'm saying is it appears unfair the way it's coming across.
Okay, David, I think what we'll do is, okay, so as I said previously, I looked at this in terms of the criteria. Bearing in mind that Simon said this is a pilot and it is starting to bridge that gap. Now, it is a start, and I fully accept the points that you make, but of course the trigger points were the greater numbers, and this is trying to address that very point that you make. So if I may, I might suggest that if you want to take this further, I understand about the wording, but maybe it's something you could pick up with Simon, probably at a separate meeting, if that's okay, to explain very clearly what that is. Stuart, did you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, if I may, Chairman, very much. I think Simon's explained it very well, and David, Councillor Simpson's points are very well made, and I think we understand. I just wanted to clarify that the reason that this programme's been introduced is not that if it was 100 houses, we'd go and do individual flood protection on 100 houses. I think the point was that if there was a whole road flooding, then it's likely that it would benefit from a scheme that was done not to protect individual property, but to kind of tackle the flooding at source. I think this programme is meant to tackle flooding that doesn't manifest itself in that way, where individual properties are at risk, typically from groundwater flooding potentially as well. And therefore, it's not, David, an attempt to focus only on large groups of property. That inevitably has some weighting in terms of Environment Agency funding in the longer term, and hence this working with the EA to encourage this pilot that tries to produce a tool that can be used to address flooding at properties that are individually vulnerable. But this is very much a scheme aimed at looking to evaluate the take-up and the operational delivery of property level protection. The kind of typical schemes that we see at places like Hambledon, Romsey, Buckskin and so on are where you do a scheme that will have the benefit of protecting a larger number of properties by actually doing engineering to the local water course or to the drainage system, or helping to provide sort of ways of channeling the water, the groundwater through settlements away from the individual properties. And by definition, those schemes, the individual properties, isolated individual properties or small groups of properties would never benefit from a scheme like that because it would never be viable.
Does that help, David?
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I didn't mean to extend the meeting, so thank you very much for the time.
That's okay, but I think you do raise a valid point. But the point I wanted to make, that there has been this issue, and this pilot tries to address that issue. And like I said, Stuart has explained very clearly, on those larger schemes, that would be a totally different approach. Or we've never had this before. So I would suggest, if you still want to, I'm sure Simon would be more than happy to have a further conversation with you if you wanted to, carry on with this. But as it's set out, you are still content with the paper that this is a good programme to be running forward as a pilot?
Yes, certainly. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that, David, and to Simon as well. So, Katie, very happy to accept the recommendations on page 13 of the pack as set out 2 down to 4. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll now go on to agenda item 3, which is the waterside transport update. You're leading on that, Stuart?
Yes, Chairman, I am. Basically, this is an update report on the waterside area. Again, Chairman, I know that you're familiar with a number of the projects and the policy development issues in this area. Waterside is becoming an increasing focus of a large amount of regeneration activity from the Fawley Waterside housing and commercial mixed development site at the bottom end of the waterside, through ongoing discussions with the Marchwood Military Port and other potential development opportunities up and down the waterside, including the expansion of the Exxon Mobil kind of facilities and capability within the existing refinery site. A number of these developments have transport implications, and this report, Chairman, seeks to bring the position up to date on that and seek your endorsement for further action on particularly on a couple of significant elements of that transport work. So the report notes the ongoing work at the southern end of the A326 corridor, where LEP funding has been successfully sought, and work is going on and due to start on that shortly. But it also recognises the importance of the northern A326 portion, which is a significant transport constraint on access in and out of the waterside at present. And the report seeks your authority to continue with work on looking at developing a multimodal approach to the further development of improved traffic flow, potentially capacity on the northern section of the A326. which was also picked as a regional priority by Transport for the South East in the work that they've been doing with the government. So the report brings you up to speed with the work that's been going on that, and seeks endorsement for further development of that work, which will include stakeholder and further consultation in due course. The report also, Chairman, flags up the potential reopening of the Waterside Railway line, which is currently in use as a freight-only service, fairly lightly used, but it is in use as an operational freight railway at present. And when the County Council previously looked at the possibility of reintroducing passenger services on this track, it did a number of studies following government guidance, which came to the conclusion that there was insufficient demand at that stage to justify a business case for further development, and the County Council policy was to effectively park the proposal at that point and not do any further work on it, but keep the situation under review in the event that circumstances changed, either in terms of demand for passenger transport on the waterside, or indeed the funding regime applying to former railway lines being brought back into passenger use, or former passenger lines in this case. Chairman, the report makes clear that both of those things have now changed. The government have announced a new funding pot specifically targeted at bringing former passenger railway lines back into use. And also the developments I outlined at the beginning have certainly changed the circumstances in relation to the possible future demand for travel on the waterside, and therefore your authority is also being sought to do further work again on the potential reopening of the railway line to help that move forward to the next stage of a business case evaluation.
That's great, Stuart. Thank you. And a couple of things from that, and I'll let you come in, David, was in terms of, it's important to note that 326 is effectively two schemes, the southern end and the northern end, and say the LEP's involvement in more the southern end, and the multimodal capacity of the cycling and walking as well, which is very significant. And as you quite rightly say, when we first looked at this some years ago, there's been a significant change in circumstances in terms of the number of development and potential developments there, which is why I think now we're at the stage where we are. Councillor Simpson, David, you wanted to comment?
Well, actually, Stuart said everything, hasn't he?
Yes.
Thank you very much for doing that. So all it leaves me to say is that Councillors Harrison and Wade are delighted that the train is being looked at again for passenger transport.
Yeah. But I agree. What I would say is, of course, we need to remember how the circumstances have changed from where we were before to where we are now. So we always said we would look at it again, and that's exactly what we're doing. So I think it's falling into place, and in terms of the funding as well, it's worked out very well from that. But we're still yet to see what that investigation, if you like, does, and how that pans out in the future. But at the moment, as I say, with the change of circumstances and the amount of development potential proposed there, it's put a different light on it, if we can say it like that. Yeah. Like, I have nothing further to add. If anybody else hasn't, so happy to accept the recommendations on page 25 and 26 of the pack as set out in 2 to 6. Katie, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so we're now on to agenda item 4, the capital programme.
Yes, Chairman, that's me again. Very briefly, this is a routine report that we bring quarterly progress reports, as you know, Chairman, before you on the capital programme, and this report takes us up to the end of Q2 of the current financial year. I think it wasn't my intention to go through the report in detail, Chairman, because I know that you've been through it and had a number of questions sort of addressed and discussed the various aspects of the report with the relevant officers on the way to this formal decision day. But the report effectively provides an update on work on the ECE capital programme to date. It notes the significant progress that's been made this year, despite the difficult working conditions, and particularly the impact of the first national lockdown, which closed down large parts of the construction industry, and particularly particularly large parts of the supply chain for the construction industry, and but that gradually reopened in the summer, and I'm very pleased to be able to report the significant progress that's been made across the board with schemes, and also, Chairman, to note that the current national lockdown has exempted construction projects from that, and work continues on both the improvement programme, capital improvement programmes, but also importantly on our highway maintenance programme across Hampshire. So really, I think it's a very good news programme, Chairman, and but I wasn't proposing to go into details on individual elements.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Stuart. As I say, we've been through this many, many times. David, you wanted a quick comment on this?
Yeah, just a quick comment. First of all, pleased that the feasibility work on the waste recycling centre at Hartley Whitney is still going ahead, which is paragraph 33. There is something coming to your next, I think it's your next decision day in January. You may have one before then. No, you have got one before then. On the A3327, I've been talking to Stuart about this. I suggest we deal with it before that meeting rather than now, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that would be sensible, and you can have a conversation with Stuart, and we can have a further catch up if we need to on that one. Yeah, okay. But you have nothing further to add on this paper?
No.
Set out today. No, okay. Well, I'd just like to say, Stuart, and pick up on some of the points you made. It is an enormous programme, and considering the conditions everybody's been working under in terms of COVID, I think it's a credit to not only being putting the paper together, but the amount of work and the size of the capital programme, and also in terms of the attracting through the bids, the additional finance that we've had through the funds to do that as well. Doing both and keeping the programme going is quite an achievement, I think. And it's the scale of it and the number of projects that we have, I think we should recognise. So very happy, Stuart, can take that back to to the whole team as well, to thank them for that and the work they've done. So I have nothing further on that. So happy to accept the recommendations on page 43 of the pack as set out 2 to 3, Katie. Thank you very much. Okay, so agenda item 5, the highway permit scheme.
Thank you, Chairman. Me again, I regret. This is the first annual report that's been brought forward, which is a requirement of operating a permit scheme, which, as you know, Chairman, we swapped over to. And therefore, because this is the first report, we thought it was appropriate to bring it before you. The report basically confirms that the scheme is operated successfully in Hampshire. It's operated within the financial and legal parameters that are set for these schemes, and we're required to report for perfectly sensible reasons of transparency on the outcome of the operation of the scheme. One of the critical financial parameters being that we should cover our costs by doing the scheme, but not sort of either fail to cover costs or make excess returns from it, and the report confirms that that has indeed been the case in the first year. Chairman, because this was the first year, as I say, we thought it was important that this came to you for a formal decision, but the report also seeks your authority in future years for these reports to be produced and published in accordance with the statutory process without necessarily bringing them for a formal decision by the executive member, unless we haven't met the requirements of the parameters for the scheme, in which case we would clearly need to bring a report to you or the executive member at the time. Thank you, Chairman.
No, thanks for that, Stuart, and I quite agree. Bringing it to the D-Day committee, if you like, this time round being the first time, I think was a sensible approach, and very happy that we don't have to do that in future. I think it's worked well. I think there was a lot of work that was done prior to that, talking to all the utility companies as well and setting it up. The aim is to make it easier but more manageable for all of us, I think, and I think it has done that and been a great success as I can see. So thank you for that. I don't think, David, you wanted to comment on this one, as I understand. So Katie, very happy to accept the recommendations on page 53 as set out in 2 to 3. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 6. This is the project appraisal for Sycamore Road and Farnborough Flood Alleviation Scheme.
I'm relieved to tell you that you get a remission break from my voice, Chairman, and then Simon's kindly agreed to lead on this one.
Well done, Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Stuart. Chairman, the project proposal before you seeks your support for a suite of flood alleviation measures to reduce risk of flooding on both Rectory Road and Sycamore Road in Farnborough. The area has a record of vulnerability to surface water flooding and groundwater flooding following heavy rainfall events and persistent rain over a long period of time. The proposals have been developed in liaison with the Borough Council, who own both the adjacent open spaces, King George's Field and the Rectory Road Recreation Ground, and will be looking to utilise both of those areas to affect natural flood management measures. We've also been working very closely with the Environment Agency and other partners, and I'm pleased to say the proposals went to a public consultation last month and were very well received. The estimated cost of the scheme is $475,000, with $150,000 of that to be secured from the National Flood Defence Grant and Aid pot and local levy from the Thames Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. So that is still subject to final business case. But subject to that and your approval, Chairman, the intention would be to start as soon as possible next year with a target date of February, March.
Okay, great, thank you. Another example of good partnership working with a local district and borough in terms of the EA as well. David, a quick comment?
Well, really, it was just a case of the first report mentioned is 1960. Even by local authority standards, 60 years seems a long time. Is there a reason it's taken so long for what is a relatively small amount of money? I mean, for each individual, 400k plus is a lot of money, but in terms of hundreds of millions, it's not. So it just seems to have taken a long time.
Chairman, if you're happy for me to answer that, I can kind of headline. I can headline the rest of what I'm going to say by saying, actually, for the county council, it's probably taken 5 years to get to this point, and let me explain why. Prior to the Flood and Water Management Act in 2010, responsibility for flood risk management was substantially with the Environment Agency. So the provisions of the Flood and Water Management Act in terms of the transfer of those responsibilities to the County Council wasn't in 2010. It took place over a number of years. So actually, some of the very last provisions of the Act came to us in about 2015. The first opportunity we had to bid against the National Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management pot was in 2015-16, after the last significant flooding in 13-14. And as you may know, we were very successful in getting on the programme a number of schemes. So in terms of Rectory Road and Sycamore Road, we've been working very closely with our partners to develop proposals for this area. As you might imagine, given that there are records of flooding from the 1960s, whoever was looking at this previously had clearly been challenged by the opportunity to kind of deliver proposals. We've got there with some work now, and so I think at the first opportunity, the County Council will be delivering improvements in this area. So hopefully, the situation that's been experienced in the past will be in the past.
In that case, Mr. Chairman, congratulations to the officers and your team.
Very good. Yes, I thought that was an excellent answer, Simon. Well done. Very good. But it does show, David, doesn't it, how circumstances change, and we need to make sure we have those facts to fully understand what has happened and what's gone on previously. Stuart, did you want a quick comment, or you're happy with that?
No, I think Simon's answered the question fully, Chairman. I've nothing to add. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, Katie, very happy to accept the recommendations on 73 of the pack set out in 2 to 5. Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 7, project appraisal, Whitehill and Borden. You can get one up, Stuart?
I am, Chairman, yes. Apologies, it's back to me again. Basically, this is a junction improvement, which is largely to benefit pedestrians and cyclists. It's part of the Whitehill Borden Green Grid Loop project, which we've developed in partnership with East Hampshire Council And this is another important project in delivering that overall scheme. I believe it has lots of local support. It's a good project, Chairman. I know you've been through the details on other occasions in more detail, and indeed you're familiar with it from your work on the Whitehill Borden area generally. And I commend the report. It's really seeking your authority to now progress to implementation with this project.
Yes, I have nothing to add, just to say this is, one part of a very big scheme we've been working on for a long time, and it's all been, really well implemented, and very pleased to see this coming forward as well. There will still be other parts of the puzzle to come forward, but this is another significant step, isn't it, in that process? Yeah. David, you're nothing on this one, I don't think.
No. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'm very happy to accept the recommendations, Katie, on page 83 of the pack as set out in 2 to 5. Thank you. Okay, so my machine's now just logged me out. Taking too long. Okay, the Parish Linksman Scheme update.
Yes, Chairman, I can be very brief with this one. I think this report is seeking your authority to confirm funding for the Parish Linksman Scheme for next financial year. We're seeking your authority at this stage so that we can give the Parish Council some certainty over the funding for the scheme next year. I know, Chairman, this is a scheme that you and other members value highly, and I know that the Parish Councils value it very highly. The County Council's financial circumstances continue to be very difficult, and therefore we're constantly having to look at all aspects of revenue expenditure. But I know that you've asked us to make a priority about trying to find an early resolution, at least for the next financial year, for this scheme, and I'm delighted to be able to recommend it to you today, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. I'm still struggling with my technology, but okay, I've got it there. I'm really pleased to see this paper coming forward. I mean, and I know we've had several conversations with the Hampshire Association of Local Councils recently, and they're pleased to see this as well. It's something that the parish councils truly value, and we've had many discussions about the amount of work that the Linksman can do. So being able to open up that, albeit with the training that they have to go through, and health and safety will clearly be paramount. But I think this is a really exciting, I think, for ourselves and for Skanska and the parish councils as well, to be able to give that opportunity to the Linksman to be able to do further work on a live network. So I'm really pleased to see this paper come forward. David, no comment?
No, parishes are delighted, the same as you.
Absolutely, yes. So thank you, Stuart, on that one. So very happy to set the recommendations on 97 of the pack as set out 2 to 4, Katie. Thank you. Okay. So agenda item 9, passenger transport contracts, concessionary fares.
Yes, Chairman, thank you very much. This report is effectively, Chairman, seeking your authority to continue to make contract payments in full to the passenger transport operators that we support, whether that's through concessionary fares, through subsidies on particular routes, and the community transport operator service that we provide. And Chairman, I know that you set great store by the partnership working with the public transport providers, and I think Hampshire has consistently throughout the COVID pandemic offered great leadership in terms of being quick to confirm our intention to continue to make payments to the passenger transport operators through the various schemes that I've outlined, which has given them some certainty of income at a time of extraordinary financial pressure and variations in passenger numbers. And I think it's important that the County Council's been able to do that, which is in accordance with central government policy and guidance that we've been given the money for these contracts, and therefore we should continue to pay them up in full, while central government have introduced various emergency provisions to help compensate for loss of fare income to the operators, but that's under a separate regime. I know that this gives certainty through to the end of the financial year for the operators about the intentions of the County Council, and therefore, Chairman, we're recommending to you that you should confirm the payments continue.
Yes, and another paper, very pleased to see. You're quite right, Stuart. I meet the 3 bus MDs on a regular basis, and they were extremely pleased with the working relationship we have. So far as to say that they thought we were one of the best authorities that they deal with. And I suppose more importantly, the speed we were making those decisions to make things a lot easier for them, life easier for them, so that they could start to plan from there, and that gave them that security to be able to plan from there. So yes, I'm very, very pleased that we're able to do that, and supporting the taxis that as well. I know at a slightly lower rate, and those services as well. So I think it's something that we've been very good at, if you like, and the speed that we've been able to react with the current crisis that there is actually across many parts of the council as well. So I think it's credit to them. David, no comment, I don't think, on this one. No, okay, all right. So very happy, Katie, to accept the recommendations as set out in page 103 of the pack, and recommendations for 4 as it is set out. Yeah, okay. So I have nothing further to add, Stuart, unless you have anything to add, that no, or David. So it's just to thank everybody for attending and for input, for all those even that haven't spoken. Thank you very much for attending as well. And I'll formally bring the meeting to a close, Katie, so we can stop the webcast. Thank you very much.